Coming up on Lawmakers, expectations for the session are discussed at the annual Eggs and Issues breakfast. Georgia's first Republican lieutenant governor assumes his position in the Senate chamber, and supporters rally in favor of legislation that would ban abortion in Georgia. Those stories and more are coming up next.
This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, Wandy Lawson and David Zelski.
Good evening. Also on Lawmakers, Senator Chip Rogers proposes legislation that would make dogfighting in Georgia a felony.
And a special joint committee meeting helps judiciary members anticipate legislation for the session. But our lead story tonight, leaders outline their legislative priorities at the annual Eggs and Issues breakfast. More than 2,000 people gathered early this morning for the annual Eggs and Issues breakfast put on by the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. It was held at the World Congress Center downtown, and Lawmakers' Sandra Parrish reports the crowd got to hear the big issues for three of the state's top leaders, Governor Sonny Perdue, Lieutenant Governor Cagle, and House Speaker Glenn Richardson. Sandra.
In Wandy, the doors opened at 7 a.m., a bit early for some who celebrated at last night's inaugural ball.
Well, good morning. Everybody talks about the great tradition of this breakfast. I think about every time when I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning on this day after the first day of the session, who had the bright idea to have a breakfast the day after the first day of the session at 7:30 in the morning? Anyhow, you ought to keep that tradition up. I suggest a lunch next time.
It was the first Eggs and Issues breakfast where the state's top leaders were all Republican. Lieutenant Governor Cagle, the first GOP member to actually hold that position in Georgia.
This breakfast has taken on a new meaning for me, and I am very grateful that I now have the chance to speak to you on the issues that people all across this great state have said were most important to them: education and jobs. I promised the people that I would address these issues, and in the 2007 legislative session, I intend to deliver.
Governor Perdue gave the crowd a preview of his agenda for the session, including health care and education. Transportation will also be a major priority.
This year, we're going to spend $2.3 billion, doubling what our spending was on transportation when I took office.
Perdue will outline plans later to crack down on Georgia's speeders.
Ladies and gentlemen, as much as it pains me to say this because I'm one myself, we've got to stop the excessive speeding. That's as hard as it is for me to say as it is for you to listen, but here are the facts. They're stunning, they're startling, and I think you all intuitively know it from riding on the roads around here. Atlanta, Georgia has one of the fastest metro area speeds in the nation.
Once Speaker Richardson took the podium, he addressed a controversy he's faced since just before being sworn into his second term as Speaker, an ethics complaint that he'd had an improper relationship with a lobbyist.
This is the last few weeks. I've been fed a little poison, and I've taken it. But the bad news for those that manufactured, dispensed, and stirred unreasonably the poison is that I survived. And I'm looking for those folks that manufactured that poison.
Richardson went on to say while he's pushing no agenda of his own this session, his main goal will be to reform Georgia's tax system.
My goal is to ensure that the hard-working families of Georgia don't pay 1 penny more in taxes than they should be, and those that aren't paying taxes start immediately.
Governor Perdue also plans to push for tax reform this session by eliminating retirement income for Georgia's senior citizens. We should learn more about that plan during his State of the State address tomorrow, his 5th since taking office. Reporting live, I'm Sandra Parrish for Lawmakers.
Thanks, Sandra. Georgia's first Republican lieutenant governor took his place on the rostrum in the chamber today to preside over the Senate for the first time. Lieutenant Governor Cagle began the day with a speech about how he hopes to run the Senate. Cagle's speech was followed by a point of personal privilege from Senate Minority Leader Robert Brown.
I will tell you that oftentimes many of y'all have heard me say that Pierre Howard was the lieutenant governor when I came in. And he was a person that truly did make an impact on my life because he governed in a very fair and very balanced way. And I think that really that's my desire, uniting this Senate together, not based on partisan politics, but based on what is in the best interest of Georgia, is really my heart's desire. I hope that many of you are very, very pleased with your committee assignments. I hope you recognize that it's not an easy thing to do on my part, but certainly we put a lot of thought and effort into it, and I think you will see and have seen that we want to reach across the party aisle, because I believe in a very deliberative body, and I hope that you will join me in working together in ensuring that we put Georgia first and party becomes irrelevant in the issues that are ultimately important. And really, I learned that lesson through Pierre Howard.
As the leader of the Democratic caucus, Mr. President, I too was here when Pierre Howard was here. I realized the benefits of his administration and his style, and I want to applaud you and extend my hand to you as a working partner in trying to make this body work and function as a unified body. I know it's not going to be easy, because I can remember within my caucus when the Lieutenant Governor Howard was moving in the direction that he moved, there was a lot of disagreement there. I suspect you will have some in yours as well. But I think your ideals are noble. We want to let you know that we know there are going to be times where we will have partisan differences. But I want to commit to you and the members of this body that we will always try to keep our discussions and our debate on a high civil plane.
In other news, pro-life advocates staged a press conference in a legislative office building this morning. The groups are all rallying behind a bill that would make abortion illegal. The measure is a direct challenge to the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision. Lawmakers Jesse Freeman is standing by at the Capitol with more on that. Jesse.
Well, in Wandy, Representative Bobby Franklin has long been a very vocal and active pro-life legislator. He wasted no time this session as he filed the very first piece of legislation in the House. House Bill 1 references Roe v. Wade, and Franklin makes no bones about this being an out-and-out challenge to the Supreme Court decision.
Pro-lifers staged a press conference in a legislative office building. Featured speakers included Representative Bobby Franklin.
Abortion is not compassionate to women. Abortion is not medical care. Abortion is the wanton destruction of human life, and it kills babies and injures women.
The group supports his House bill that would outlaw abortion.
We know that abortion hurts women. There have been many changes since Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton were decided in 1973, including the evidence of both physical and psychological harm to women.
But pro-choice advocates say the bill doesn't have all the facts straight.
A lot of the facts that it alludes to as far as the effect on women are just simply not medically and scientifically accurate. We have not certainly been able to prove that mental illness or drug addiction stems from having had an abortion.
Although this morning's press conference was held in a room in the Coverdale Legislative Office Building where House committees often meet, this bill did not have a formal hearing. It has not yet been assigned to a committee. Remember, it's still early in the session. Reporting live, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
Thanks, Jesse. Senator Chip Rogers held a press conference today to introduce legislation that strengthens Georgia's law against dogfighting, making it a felony, up to 10 years in prison. Similar legislation passed the Senate last year but stalled in the House. Rogers says this year's version, Senate Bill 16, is a more precise bill and is necessary because Georgia's current law is one of the weakest in the country.
Right now, you pretty much have to catch the person in the offense, catch them involved in dogfighting. What this would allow is a person who's training a dog for the purposes of dogfighting, of course, I would add the word knowingly to all this, selling a dog for the purposes of dogfighting, harboring a dog for the purposes of dogfighting, owning a dog for the purposes of dogfighting, holding the dogfighting event, advertising the dogfighting event. All of those things go into this, our attempt here in Senate Bill 16. So in other words, if you are involved in the entire enterprise of fighting these dogs, we're going to want to come after you. And when you show up and you have 12 dead dogs or 12 severely injured dogs all laying in a pile that have simply been discarded, you know dogfighting has occurred. You would be able to present that evidence under this new law. The narrowly defined current law would probably prevent you from doing that, though you could certainly prosecute them under a cruelty to animal charge. But look, the people that are involved in this need to be charged with more than just cruelty to animals. We need to put them out of business.
Last year's version also included provisions on hog fighting, but some members of the House believed it could have affected Georgia hunters. Senator Rogers says Senate Bill 16 should not face those same roadblocks this year. A joint House-Senate Judiciary Committee was held today to discuss results from 2 study committees. The first dealing with indigent defense, the second, how judges are compensated. I had a chance to talk this afternoon with Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Preston Smith about today's meeting and a few more issues his committee may be facing this session.
The first half of the meeting was dedicated to giving legislators an update of the Georgia Public Defender Standards Council. Georgia has a relatively new public defender system that is statewide, and the members of that committee wanted to brief the committee members on where they've been, where they are now, and where they expect to be in the next year and 18 months. The second half of the meeting was a presentation by former Representative and Majority Leader Larry Walker from the State Bar of Georgia on their Commission on Judicial Service to discuss the way that judges are compensated in the different service of both the state superior courts and the appellate courts in Georgia, and how we might run a more efficient judicial system. We will have additional legislation dealing with online crimes in general and also in predatory type crimes. And I expect there'll be a number of other bills coming before the committee. As you know, Judiciary is one of the busiest committees, standing committees in the Senate, and sometimes nearly half of bills come through that committee or have some relationship to that committee.
As promised, more highlights from this morning's Eggs and Issues breakfast, where Governor Perdue said his priorities are inspired by Franklin Covey's counsel. The main thing is to keep the main thing, beginning with education.
Our main thing hasn't changed this year. We're still working hard to make our educational system top-notch, world-class. We remain focused on moving forward on raising Georgia's SAT scores and rankings, and certainly graduation rates, both of which have improved, and we're grateful for that. But we're not where we will be. We will continue our march forward. In 4 years, our graduation rates rose 7.5%. I like that number, but I like the other number. 7,935 young people graduated from high school last year, representing that percentage that would not have graduated 4 years ago. In 13 years, next year's kindergarten class will be seniors in high school. Ladies and gentlemen, why can we not aspire that each one of them, every one of them, walk across the stage in front of their friends and families with a high school diploma in hand? That's my vision. I hope it's Georgia's vision. You know that we've already placed graduation coaches in every high school across the state. And this year, I'll recommend to the General Assembly that we fund coaches in every middle school to help those young people make that important transition. But ladies and gentlemen, we need you to do something that only you can do. We need you to help connect these coaches with the world, the real world our children will enter after graduation. We have a liaison. My plan is for you to hook up with these graduation coaches who will identify these young people, help you understand the barriers that they have to graduation, and there are many, and let the business community mentor these young people. You can provide real work experience for students by adopting those high school students, by giving them opportunities for job shadowing or internships or even a part-time job himself. Anything to give the students an exciting sense of the promises ahead of them if they get a good education.
Governor Perdue went on to highlight the state's achievements in transportation, especially in overcoming traffic woes.
We see the problem, and we're tackling congestion on our roads each day. But 50% of it, as we know, is caused by accidents. Last year, we increased those hero units that are popular with everyone, especially if you've ever been by the side of the road on a busy interstate in Atlanta. We've increased the hero coverage by 60 miles, and we're adding another 80 miles this year for 300 total miles of hero unit coverage. Our accident clearance time has already been cut in half because of their efforts.
The governor concluded his remarks with a pledge to support funding to increase international economic development.
I will be recommending to the General Assembly that we invest an additional $5.1 million If you must know, that's a 135% increase to help open the door to the world for Georgia companies. Our state's import-to-export ratio is approximately 1 to 1. That means for every loaded cargo ship coming into our Savannah ports and Brunswick ports, one goes out laden with Georgia-grown products like turf grass, for instance. Can you imagine exporting grass? Just last week we were in Washington County there for a Super Bowl turf send-off. But our turf grass doesn't just ensure that we'll be represented in the Super Bowl every year. It's one of those many Georgia-grown companies reaping the benefits of innovative ideas. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an example of the payoff from the investment in our extensive port system, in our Georgia-grown companies, and in our international economic development.
Now, one funding issue that Governor Perdue did not mention at this morning's breakfast is the state of health care. The Department of Community Health says that Congress's failure to reauthorize the state child health insurance program means the Peach Care insurance program for kids faces a $130 million shortfall.
What that means for us is in order for us to comply with all the regulations and laws, we project that we're going to run out of money in March. That means that we have to give notice to all Peach Care members, 270,000 plus kids, February 1st, that Peach Care will be halted.
While child advocates agree that it's up to Congress to fix the problem, in the short run, they're hoping the General Assembly will act.
It is simply an unacceptable option to think about terminating health care coverage for 270,000 children. And we believe that the state has some other options. If somehow Congress does not take action in a completely timely fashion, which would be irresponsible nonetheless if it happens, we believe that the state has some options that don't involve having to come up with all $131 million. And we hope that the state officials are looking at that very carefully so that we don't have to frighten families. In the past, when we have had administrative changes that have caused some children to drop off Medicaid, we've seen all kinds of issues with children's health. Children not getting asthma medication that they need, children who were doing well in school with the kinds of medications that they needed for attention deficit disorder, suddenly having major problems and getting expelled from school again. So this is something that should not be allowed to happen, and we believe the state does not have to allow it to happen. We do think the first responsibility, though, is Congress.
Lieutenant Governor Cagle said education and job growth will be his top legislative priorities. He says he wants to see the state excel in the production of alternative fuels, biotechnology, logistics, and corporate headquarters. The Lieutenant Governor also said he will introduce legislation to create a charter school district.
We have already seen excellence with our charter schools and have heard of their remarkable success. Charter schools have demonstrated that they can reach the goals of education without all of the burdensome mandates that tie the hands of our teachers. I want to build upon this success. So this year we will put plans in place to allow the creation of charter systems. Charter systems allow the truest control, local control of public education. And I intend to give that control to our educators. We have also seen excellence with our career academies. Academies like the Central Education Center in Noonan provide a sensible alternative for students who don't want to follow the traditional one-size-fits-all curriculums we have now. These students can instead attend a school that will provide them with real-world experience and teach them the technical skills they need to become a valuable addition to Georgia's workforce. So this year, we will we'll propose instituting planning grants for the startup of 5 new career academies throughout the state. The opportunity for students to gain a technical certificate which guarantees employment upon graduation is what education should be all about. We are proposing the creation of a jobs advocate position. The new position will serve a dual role, being staffed in the Department of Economic Development and assigned to the Office of Lieutenant Governor. The Jobs Advocate will work with the General Assembly to help coordinate our efforts to promote jobs. We'll build a bridge between companies and our state government. The businesses who plan to grow our economy need to know that Georgia is serious about supporting their efforts. The Jobs Advocate will be a dedicated ally to companies throughout the state.
Now, as you saw earlier in our program, House Speaker Glenn Richardson says tax reform is at the top of his legislative agenda. In fact, a House Study Committee has recently been exploring tax reform. House Ways and Means Chairman Larry O'Neill authored legislation last session that created this study committee. They've been working through the summer, but he says their work hasn't yielded the comprehensive results they aim for.
I think you're going to see some what I'd call lesser or small initiative bills, just some corrections, some tweaks in the tax code. As far as a major policy bill, the only one I see that seems to have what I'd call legs right now is the governor's seniors tax exemption bill. I mean, I see that as a major policy change for this year.
Last Wednesday, the study committee heard over 5 hours of testimony, largely from lawyers and lobbyists at the site in North Fulton County. Chairman O'Neill said last week's testimony was similar to what he heard when he decided to help create the committee.
We haven't really had any substantial change in our code since the early 50s. A lot of people have let us know in no uncertain terms that our code's archaic in many ways. It has become over time layered with a lot of complexity that makes it very non-transparent, hard to understand for taxpayers, in many cases more expensive to comply with than the tax itself. We feel like that's fundamentally wrong.
Now, Governor Perdue's proposed tax break for seniors that Chairman O'Neill alluded to has not yet been filed. That will most likely come from the governor's House Floor Leader, Rich Goldick.
Well, for those of you with access to the internet, you can watch Lawmakers online. Visit our website at gpb.org for more information. Click on Watch Online and then follow the instructions for watching live or looking at past Lawmakers programs in our archives. That website address again is gpb.org. Just another way we keep you apprised of what's going on at the General Assembly.
We'd like to recommend a website that's a valuable resource for information about the Georgia General Assembly. Go to www.legis.ga.gov. That website is a great research tool we at Lawmakers use on a regular basis. New and incumbent legislators convened in Atlanta this morning, but they aren't necessarily strangers. In December, representatives, senators, and staff all spent a few days in Athens getting to know each other at the Biennial Institute presented by the Carl Vinson Institute of Government at the University of Georgia.
Incumbents and newly elected legislators convened in Athens on the campus of the University of Georgia for the state's 25th biennial. The mid-December event is ground zero for policymakers preparing for the 2007 session.
We provide a training program track for newly elected legislators, and we provide classes on very basic things.
The event was initially for new legislators only, and newly elected officials like Representatives Tony Cillier and Hardy Davis get a crash course in procedure.
We're excited about the biennial. It's obviously our first time being here, but the sessions that we've been to thus far have been informative.
It's like drinking water out of a fire hose. We're learning a lot of things. We're interacting and working with and getting to know the legislators and understanding what the issues are.
Incumbents also attend to participate in breakout groups highlighting upcoming issues.
Georgia, fortunately, is a fast-growing state, but along with that comes all the issues related to the environment, to water, to planning, to all the services that have to be provided.
The learning process is not, however, limited to a classroom-like setting. New lawmakers have benefited from the biennial for half a century now. And for over 30 years, all lawmakers have had access to the pertinent policy issue updates. But the biggest benefit of the Institute may be the connections that are made, the relationships that are fortified between our elected officials.
I think it is so vitally important for us to network, meeting the different individuals here, both in the House and in the Senate.
Being successful as a legislator is a lot of things, but one of the main things is being able to network with other legislators.
The biennial concluded December 12th, but the learning continues for an exam that won't end until nearly April. In Athens, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
In addition to several issue seminars and classes on procedure, legislators attending the Biennial Institute also got a preview of Governor Perdue's legislative agenda. It's a tradition that the governor deliver the final keynote address of the Biennial Institute in December. This time he took the opportunity to promote two of his initiatives that failed last session, his Faith and Family Services Amendment and his Hope Chest initiative.
Georgia's neediest children cannot afford to have the state continue discriminating against organizations simply because they are faith-based. I would like your support in finding a way to meet the needs of our children, regardless of where the services are coming from. And secondly, every Georgian deserves the opportunity for a world-class education, and we worked hard in Georgia to provide them. And that's why I'm committed to preserving the lottery funds for the Hope Scholarship and the pre-K with the Hope Chest Amendment.
Governor Perdue praised lawmakers for maintaining a frugal budget during his first 4 years in office. He also cautioned them that though there is more money in the general fund this year, he still wants smart spending.
Most people outside of government, when they hear surplus, they think, oh good, I can finally save some money. But special interests that vie for our attention, on the other hand, when they hear surplus, they think, oh good, we can finally spend some money on my project.
The governor is expected to share his spending priorities and legislative agenda in his State of the State address tomorrow.
Coming up tomorrow on a special edition of Lawmakers, we'll have the entirety of Governor Perdue's State of the State address and reaction to the legislative agenda he sets forth. That's tomorrow night at 7 p.m. If you would like to watch the governor deliver that address to a joint session of the Georgia General Assembly live, join us online for our webcast at 12 noon. You can watch that address live on Georgia Public Broadcasting's website at gpb.org. If you have missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in tomorrow morning when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. Now stay tuned for Wild Chronicles. Tonight's episode features killer whales of Puget Sound and adventuring in the Arctic. Join host Boyd Matson for Wild Chronicles. That program is coming up next here on GPB.
And of course, we have a real big day tomorrow with the governor's State of the State. We got a little glimpse there with the Eggs and Issues breakfast this morning. He said, of course, education, transportation, job creation. Those will be his top priorities. We'll learn a little bit more about what the legislative agenda looks like.
It'll be interesting to see what comes out. There was something the Republicans put forth called Georgia Speaks, where people can actually call in, go online, and create legislation of their own, give some advice.
So you can always log on and try that out for yourself. Of course, to find out exactly what will go on to the bones of the governor's legislative agenda, we'll have to stay tuned till the State of the State address tomorrow. We will have that streamed for you at noon, and then, of course, our entire broadcast tomorrow is going to really recap that for you. That's, of course, our broadcast for this, the second legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Wendy Lawson.
And I'm David Zelski. Thank you so much for joining us. Good evening.
Good night.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting. Tonight.